One Piece episode 3 actually it's a setup for episode 4, isn't it? Even though this series, the episodes all string along, this one sets up the confrontation of episode 4. This particular scene that I've got up behind me is Nami. That's her name. Thank you to the character who kept on saying it over and over. So in this particular scene, she decides that she is going to steal. What is it with these rich people? Blah, blah, blah. They live in all these big mansions and so on and so forth, while there's people on the street who have nothing. Why do they need so much space? They've got more than they need for one person, blah, blah, blah. Now, of course, she doesn't know anything about the people involved in this house, and in particular, the woman who she's having a conversation with here, who she finds out is sick, inherited this as a child, and has basically been looked after and decisions made by the butler kind of thing up until that time. So they have this little bit of a bonding type of a moment. And the reason I chose this particular scene was, to me, it showed a change in attitude a little bit from Nami, just a little bit, where her interaction, she starts off as one thing and she leaves the conversation as something else. She's had a change of heart, but likewise, she has tried to instill some strength in decision making and being your own person into the woman that she's having a chat with, which is the infirm lady of the house. And I just thought, yes, there were other things going on within episode 3, but this one little conversation that they had, I thought was a nice little human touch to put into the fantasy of these people having all these weird, wonderful skills and pirates that can run around like they're the Flash. They seemingly disappear. They're that fast in their movements that you can't see them when they start to move. So in this particular episode, of course, we do have the reveal that we all knew. We all knew. It was obvious to me, at least anyway, so I assume the rest of the audience, that the girl who's sick is being poisoned by the other people in the house. It was obvious before it was made clear and apparent that that is actually what they were doing with this woman. That's how I took it, at least anyway. So episode 3 and 4, they kind of blend into each other. It's really like it was one long episode that they just decided to make an episode 3 and 4 out of it, because it's still, episode 4 is still a continuation of this story within the house. So here we get to meet Aesop, whatever his name is, habitual liar, compulsive liar, just lies out of his, if his lips are moving, he's lying. He's that kind of a guy. And essentially this is the boy who cried wolf type of tale, where he cried wolf so often that people just, when there was a wolf, no one's looking at him. They're just not believing him anymore because he cried wolf all the time, even from a little kid. And he's telling these fantastic stories. And look, at the end of the day, I think the woman he's telling them to knows they're bullshit, but she just, it's an escape from her and from her life, from her reality. And I liked this whole setup thing because it sums up why we even go to the movies in the first place, or why we choose to watch a movie or choose to watch something. And that is, we escape from the reality of our world and we want a little bit of a fantasy that doesn't exist. So the idea was, for instance, in the Great Depression, people would go to the movies. Movies were like super cheap. You'd think, there's no money, how can they go? Well, they could go because not only were they super cheap, but maybe they got a little gift, like a cup made of glass. So they could at least get a tangible item. So it's almost like they've bought the tangible item for $1, and at the same time they got to escape the reality of the horrid conditions of the Great Depression, and they got to escape into a fantasy world, which was the movie. And this is why people reject injecting current day into films, unless you're going to make fun of it, kind of like Rian Johnson did in The Glass Onion. If you're not making fun of some of the terminologies and things like that of current day, then people, they don't want it. They don't want the seriousness of current day injected into a movie which they're trying to escape current day from. If they want to see that, they'll just go outside their door, kind of thing. So in this, yeah, look, this scene you could have said, look, it's a little bit of girl empowerment or whatever, but I don't take it as just girl empowerment. I take it as people empowerment. If you've not seen it, just pay attention to the words that she's using about being her own person and making decisions for herself. And I think objectively for herself. So while she starts out as potentially just being selfish, which means the decisions might benefit herself, but they're not necessarily long-term beneficial. But then she leaves the scene or the episode. My take is that she is now applying more objective self-interest. And that is, yes, it's in her benefit, but objectively, it's definitely in her benefit. So, for example, the selfish Nami would steal the items, but that's not objectively in her best interest because now she'll have the police after her. Whereas objectively, leaving the items behind and doing some other things is also in her best interest, but she also will not have any police coming to her. So there's a difference between being selfish and having objective self-interest. And so I took it by the end of this kind of episode, Nami had developed objective self-interest as opposed to selfishness, while also instilling in Kaya a sense of self-worth and being able to be your own person instead of bending at the whims to everybody else's wishes. So that's why I liked this particular scene. Okay, I have to be careful here with what I'm getting mixed up in, so I think what I'll say next will be for the review of episode 4. But this one was great. We also had the setup where Kobe, I'm kind of getting sick and tired of Kobe's frightened boy look, to be honest with you. There's like every scene he's in, he's like that apprehensive frightened boy look with the big glasses and the wide eyes, unsure of himself. And yes, the captain looks like he's trying to get that out of him and get him to be more decisive. But it's just starting to be grating. It's like, come on, mate. Like, you can't be perpetually this guy. And look, I'd like to assume that later on in the series he will lose that timidness, frightened boy look and become more stern in his resolutions about doing things. But we've got that little plot element coming in as well. So we've got the new pirate at the house, which he can run around like the Flash. He's got the Freddy Krueger knives as fingers. And that episode 4 kind of sets up, episode 3 kind of sets up where we're going into episode 4. And that'll be my next review.